Good.
First
Awesome.
of all, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing good. Yourself?
Yeah, very good. Very good.
A fantastic room, by the way. There's a whiteboard stuff here.
Okay. Yeah, it's my study here at my home office. So yeah, it's you got to make where you work as comfortable as you possibly can.
Yeah, makes sense. Definitely. So, first of all, thank you for taking the time to do this. Before we dive in, I just want to give a bit of context for our conversation. So, first
Cool.
of all, I'm Bruce, founder of Convert Inbox, where we partner with B2B SaaS companies to help grow their business and revenue with outbound client acquisition. So, we are speaking with experienced leaders like yourself to gain a broader understanding of this new nascent AI SaaS market, the landscape and emerging trends. Okay, so your insights will be invaluable not only for our company but also for this white paper we are developing. Provide value back to the participants and community for free. Okay, so the participants will have exclusive early access to this white paper before we share it to our network. So the whole course
Splendid.
will usually take about 30 minutes. Okay, how does that sound?
Good. Well, let's get going because I have a hard stop at 10:30 my time. So let's roll.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, before we dive into the broader conversation, can I just clarify your current role right now within MoogSoft? Are you still actively involved with the company
Yeah. So
acquisition by Dell?
yeah. So obviously I was the CEO of MoogSoft and one of the two founders of the company, and we were acquired by Dell Technologies last year, and I essentially carried on as in my role as leading that group. So my title at Dell is VP of AI Ops and Observability, and I have a responsibility for the legacy MoogSoft team, but also inside of Dell, they have another product called Cloud IQ, and that team also has merged into my team, and so we have a collective set of products now that are in the AI space.
Got it. But what are you responsible for on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day basis, I run a group, so I'm responsible for the engineering, design, delivery, development of the products in the AI space. I'm responsible for the commercialization of those products, and also, one or two other sort of internally focused serviceability outcomes, which essentially is using AI ops to um, to modernize, if you will, how we operate our internal infrastructure.
Right. So just to give us and the audience some understanding, right? Could you just share a bit more about why is MoogSoft started? What kind of problems was it trying to solve
Sure.
for what particular group?
Sure. So, in essence, it really starts with the very simple observation that complex digital infrastructure is generally focused on some business outcome of some sort. So, for example, you might have a website that is a commercial shop front for a retail company. So there's a lot of digital infrastructure in the back end that is supporting the availability of that website, and that business will care about what percentage of the time customers can navigate to that website and actually use it in a performant and reliable way. The problem is that complicated and at-scale infrastructure tends to fail in all kinds of weird and wonderful ways. And there are operations teams whose job it is, SRE teams, whose job it is to engineer for site reliability and for uptime. What we do with our products is we produce products that aid them in that job. So they're typically monitoring products. We're ingesting data from all the various different sort of devices, applications, network devices, whatever it might be. And we're trying to form a picture of where there may be actions that need to be taken to prevent outages, to maintain availability. And this is not a new market. I mean, this has been around a very long time. People have been building this type of software going back since the birth of commercial enterprise computing. What's different about what we do, and both at Dell and also prominent at MoogSoft, is fundamentally the use of AI to help deal with the scale and the complexity of modern deployment architectures. So, whether it's public cloud, now with Gen AI and types of highly GPU dense compute people put in there, it requires, more and more data to be collected, more and more data to be analyzed. And that's where you need AI to help with that.
Got it. So it's all about trying to make the whole deployment process to the cloud or any kind of network infrastructure much more efficient and optimized with AI. And that's the unique selling point of.
Yeah. So we're very focused on modern infrastructure.
I see. Then let's talk a bit about when you were trying to scale and grow MoogSoft. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced
Sure.
at that
So,
stage, and how do you overcome that?
I mean, a good way of thinking about building a SaaS software company is you're essentially building a value chain. I mean, and it's one that is not it's not linear in the sense of it's got a start and an end. It tends to be quite iterative on itself. So, you need to build a product that addresses a demand. And it sounds very, very simple, but it's not necessarily straightforward to do. And then once you do that, you have to focus a lot on demand generation, and then the satisfaction of that demand through a repeatable, scalable sales go-to-market model. And then, of course, in the subscription business, which is a big change really from where enterprise software used to be many years ago, before the SaaS revolution. Typically, you're very focused on a subscription business that renews annually or renews monthly, and so you're having to continually, nurture and take care of your customers to guarantee that they continue to subscribe from you, but B, also you typically trying to grow your subscription. So, if you think about a healthy subscription software business, in a given quarter, the bookings should mostly come from your existing customers. You are adding to your customer base and the base of your subscriptions. So when you think about the challenges, they tend to, in my view, fall into three buckets. One is an efficient demand generation activity, and depending upon the nature of the business, you're going to balance outbound demand generation versus inbound demand generation differently. What are those two different types? Outbound is where you are going and finding customers. So, very old-fashioned things like mailer campaigns, trade shows, all the rest of it. Inbound is when you are encouraging people through content to try your product with free market-facing, trial, sort of a try before you buy type thing. Either way, you need to generate a lot of demand, because the funnel from there to actually getting orders tends to be quite a steep reduction in numbers. So, you might, for trials, you might get only 2% that convert, which is actually pretty good from an industry statistic. So the sale, as you go from demand to sales, that handover from demand to sales is a challenging area. Has changed a lot, and has become much more data driven than it ever used to be. So before you get to a Salesforce with a SaaS product, you need to be instrumenting the trial in such a way that you're getting quality sort of intelligence from the data as to usage patterns and whether or not that indicates somebody who is ready to to convert to a paid for trial. So demand is one bucket. That conversion to the demand to leads for your sales team should be data driven is the second challenge. Then the third challenge is customer success. And this is if you're trying to grow a subscription base, it's all about your expansion business. And I think for a young SaaS software company, getting that balance right is really hard. And the trouble is it also changes as you scale. So very early on, you'll find a lot of SaaS companies, it's one customer at a time. It's, I've got to get it working at customer A, I've got to get it working at customer B. And it's only when you get to a critical level of market-based proof that you can start to switch to much more automated and mechanized and at scale subscription value chain. And making those decisions is probably the what makes a good CEO versus a bad CEO of those sorts of companies, and putting the right level of focus in those areas is probably also another key sort of decision points for executives in those businesses.
Right, right. That was very insightful. I think you spoke at length about the transition from the demand generation to sales, right? Could you just share a bit more examples of why is that the major challenge? What are some of the common struggles that marketing and sales teams face in sort of transitioning, in passing over this marketing qualified lead to become a sales qualified?
Sure. Like almost anything in life, it's all about the decisions you make about where you spend your time and effort, what dictates your success. So, again, put it very simply, you might have 1,000 trials running simultaneously, as an example. Which ones of those thousands do you point your inside sales team, or for that matter, your sales team at, to try and have a conversation with the customer about converting from free to paid for? And you've kind of got two choices. You can either systematically try and talk to them all, or you can spend your time talking to the ones who are more likely to buy. So how do you know that? Well, one of the ways in which a SaaS product has a great benefit over sort of on-prem software is you can get a lot of data from the product itself about usage patterns, and and this is not something which is out of the box or straightforward. So, for example, in our product, we looked a lot for when people wrote their own correlation definitions in our product. That told us that somebody was really using the product versus another customer that might not ever have done that, and that requires a different response from the demand marketing engine. In the case of the customers that were writing their own correlation engines, that would trigger an outreach from an inside sales rep, and we had at that point, a much higher percentage of conversion than if the inside sales rep would be talking to somebody who's not written a correlation definition. And actually, what we would do in the scenario where we've got a customer who wasn't writing correlation definition, we would drop content into the product that would essentially try and explain to them why they should be thinking about doing that. So the product itself becomes an automated sales tool, and there's a whole area now around this subject, and it's got many different names. Some people call it growth hacking or growth engineering. Some people call it digital marketing. Some people just call it growth. But fundamentally, it is the very close interplay between design, demand marketing, and sales. To build a product that both self-enables the users so that they don't need, they can find their way to value just by using the product, but also self-identifies. So we can automatically mine the usage patterns that are indicators of a customer that's ready to have a buying conversation.
Right. So it's all about analyzing the patterns in which they purchase, like the model, like recency, frequency, and monetary value. Just sort of looking at the patterns and then determining the highest ROI buyers to focus on, and then putting most of your sales reps' efforts into that.
Yeah, that's right. And it's kind of why I said also it sort of doesn't kind of just happen as if by magic or out of the box, because you need to, as your product matures, and it's almost the definition of product market fit. you will learn what those usage patterns are that generate the buying behaviors that you're looking for. And of course, product management, who are responsible for the feature footprint of the product, are closely involved in that process. So obviously they're going to be using that same data to optimize the product for value, for market relevance as well with that.
Right, that makes sense. So now let's talk a bit about sort of how you navigated the acquisition pitch by Dell. Having gone through a successful acquisition, like, what are some key factors that you think founders of SaaS companies should consider if they are aiming for a successful exit? Any advice on how to prepare a
Mhm.
company for this transition?
My single bit of advice is never consciously and intentionally build a company for acquisition. Build a company to be able to scale and grow to an independent future, and good things will happen. Acquisitions and M&A are intensely unpredictable and organic matters. Like company. There's a sort of an aphorism that is sometimes used, which is companies are not sold, they're bought. And really what is meant by that is, if you try and sell your company, it usually doesn't end up with the kind of outcomes that you would want for, versus if you build a company that kind of doesn't care whether it's going to get bought or sold, then the if you like, the economics around it are in the favor of the business. So if you build a company that is growing, you build a company that is profitable, you build a company that has a differentiation in the market, then the buyers will come and find you, and that's usually a better outcome than you going to find the buyers. Now that's not. I appreciate that is kind of easier said than done, because sometimes it's life doesn't work out to be quite as straightforward as you would want it to be. But there are, and I've noticed this perhaps increasingly over the course of my career, a common young founder mistake is to think, well, a great outcome for me is getting bought by name a brand name company. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hang out in the lobby, figuratively speaking, build products that closely align to a particular acquisition target, and they may not notice it. What they are looking for, the big companies are, where there is strategic fit for them in doing an acquisition, where it can accelerate their time to market, where it can improve their profile. And all of that is best addressed by a company that is independently successful. So it all comes back to, build a great company and good things will happen. If you're building a so-so company, then there's nothing you can do to get a great purchase acquisition for your business by doing that, and get back to focusing on building the great company.
Right. So what you're saying is you shouldn't just build a company for the sole intention of getting purchased by another similar company, but then you're not that independently successful. You sort of have to depend on them to be successful, because otherwise it's no longer a
Yeah.
product that is
Yeah.
that
There's
people
also
can
the
provide for.
there's also the commercial version of Pascal's wager. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but Pascal's wager is the very famous one about the existence of God, which is the consequence of being wrong if you believe in God are a lot less severe than the consequence of being wrong if you don't. And it's a bit similar with this scenario, which is if you focus on building a successful company that is independent, then if you don't get bought, you just carry on building that business. And wealth creation, business success are all going to come anyway at some point in the future. It just may take longer, for you to get there. And there's also another angle to this as well, Bruce, that I think is quite important, which is I'm involved with lots of young entrepreneurial activity, and one of the things I always say is you need to answer the question, why are you doing this? Very honestly to yourself when you are either considering an entrepreneurial career or you are an entrepreneur and starting a business. If the what you are doing this for is, fame and riches, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Because they are not provocable outcomes. You can't, there is no physics behind, there's no science behind what do I do to make a company, inevitably become economically successful? How can I get famous by doing that? Those are consequences of doing the right thing in building the business. So you've got to keep focusing on that and do something that you love because, what if it takes 20 years? There's nothing wrong with that in terms of achieving your goals, unless you hate what you're doing, in which case you're just wasting 20 years of your life doing something that doesn't bring you joy, and you probably should have thought about that. So I think it's very, very important with young entrepreneurs and company founders and all the rest of this kind of stuff that when you set out to build a thing, be very deliberate about why you are building it and what's in it for you and what you seek to get out of it, and make sure that they are not outcomes that are just lottery ticket outcomes. Gen AI is massive at the moment, and it sort of seems like there's lots of people making lots of money out of Gen AI. So starting a Gen AI company, because it's a huge trend, and you might be lucky and get rich, just go and buy a lottery ticket. It's the odds may not actually be that far off. But if you're starting a Gen AI company because you've got genuine insights, then you can go for it. Sorry, Bruce, what'd you say?
Does it remind you of the dot-com bubble?
It does. Yeah, it does. There are, and the dot-com bubble's not the only one in the last 20 years. There was a lot of hype around building SaaS companies that really kicked off in the early 2010s with the birth of hyperscalers and, of course, famously AWS. And there was a lot of companies piling into that. And that was an outcome which, I think there's a bit of a hangover at the moment in the venture markets around SaaS software companies that were overvalued and can't find an outcome. But there are aspects of it. The Gen AI one, though, is we're in very early innings with it, and my guess is that it won't be as impactful as some of the most extreme predictions are, and it won't be a dud either. It'll be somewhere in between. And let's see how the next year goes.
Got it.
Are you familiar with the term enshittification?
Come again?
So are you familiar with the term enshittification?
No, I've never heard of it.
Okay, so it goes like this, and this is just for fun. There is I want to say that ChatGPT 4 is 1.7 trillion parameters, more or less. And of course, this is growing exponentially in time. And the number of parameters goes up as the amount of data that you train the system on goes up. And it is reckoned that by 2026, there won't be enough data left to train large language models. So they're going to have to start generating their own training set. And when they start generating their own training set, they're kind of eating their own fumes. And what will happen, it is believed, is that it will degrade the performance of these large language models. So in other words, there is a point at which there is a maximum in the effectiveness of these large language models, after which they start to degrade. And that process is called enshittification by some people of the LLMs. More hallucinations, more incorrects. So, does it follow a Moore's law or does it drop off a cliff? We'll see. We'll know next year.
Right. That's very interesting. So I actually wanted to circle back to your earlier point about demand generation field. I understand you said that that was one of the core pillars of a successful startup, right? So So reflecting on your time with MoogSoft, what were some strategies that were most effective for customer acquisition and retention? Were there any particular approaches or channels that stood out to you?
Yeah. So I would really call out two things. And one's an early innings, one's a late innings thing. The early innings is the presence of the founders. You have to get out there and build a profile for the business. And it's a kind of almost corporate content is what you focus on, both on the website, outbound campaigns, and just get as much in the way of industry focused speaking slots where you can talk about the issues that are important to your customer. But as you get into the later innings, it's about content placement where your customers are and creating an independent reason for them to come to you for comment. So you know how this is, right? You get a sort of a cold call. Somebody rings you up and says, "Hey, Bruce, have you got 5 minutes? I want to talk to you about your cable choices." And it's like, phone goes down. Just don't want to have that conversation. Um, that is an interaction where the only intent is economic, and most customers are very turned off by that. Okay? But if somebody rang you up and said, "Hey, Bruce, how you doing? You don't know me, but what I wanted to tell you about is I learned about this really interesting hack whereby if you are using an Eero router, you can pick up channel 5 news or something on it." And you'd be like, "Oh, well, that's interesting. This is kind of a tip." And you'd start sort of maybe talking to me. And what's going on is I'm building a relationship where I've not asked for money yet. I'm earning the right to have a conversation with you about you becoming a customer. And now I'm using a ridiculous example, but there are concrete ways in which we do that. So, commenting into forums like Stack Overflow, providing tips about how you solve, common availability problems. And eventually people will notice that, a MoogSoft is a generally helpful business that seems to know a lot about availability. So when they have a problem with availability, they will come to your website and interact with it. Unfortunately, I'm running up against a hard stop, so I'm going to have to probably draw to a conclusion.
Yeah, no problem. I was about to mention that as well. But my last question is, Phil, what are some people or companies that you know of that are similar to you or in the industry with whom I can set up like a similar interview for this
Um,
market?
there's a bunch now that are around our space. I mean, Logs.io, Big Panda, they're all in our market and growing and doing well. And they might be worthwhile you chasing up.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Well, once again, it was a pleasure talking with you, Phil. Thank you so much for taking the time up to do this interview with me, as well as sharing all of these very fruitful insights, right? Would you be comfortable if I share this, publicly, say on LinkedIn or
Yeah,
something?
it's fine.
I think it'll be very valuable.
There's nothing in there that's company sensitive. Right. Awesome. Super.
Perfect.
Thanks, Bruce.
Well, the
Cheers.
white paper I will share it with you in about 2 weeks once it's ready, and let's be connected on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good to talk,
Okay, thank
Bruce.
you, Phil.
You have a good evening.